We begin with breaking news out of the Badger State. CBS News is projecting Wisconsin to flip for Joe Biden. That would mean 10 additional electoral votes for the former VP. This is, of course, a battleground state that President Trump won in 2016. Again, CBS News is projecting Joe Biden has won the state of Wisconsin and its 10 electoral votes, giving him a current total of 237 electoral votes to President Trump's 213. For more on this, CBS News 2020 campaign reporter Adam Brewster joins me from Detroit. Hi, Adam. So put this into perspective for us. What does this state win mean for Joe Biden?
Well, it puts him one step closer towards that magic 270 number that you need. There will be several other states to watch. Of course, Wisconsin, you mentioned President Trump, first Republican to win Wisconsin since 1984 when he won it in 2016. It was part of, that so-called blue wall that Democrats said they wanted to build back in the Rust Belt states in Michigan and Wisconsin, over in Pennsylvania. It has been a focus. Joe Biden used to talk about it on the campaign trail back in Iowa about how he was someone who could win in the Midwest. And so this is a win that would be significant for him and puts him, or a projection, I should say, that puts him, one step closer to that 270 mark.
I mean, we should probably also point out that all of this is happening against the backdrop of the coronavirus. Wisconsin reported its highest daily infection number today, 5,935 COVID cases reported today. So surely this must have played into the race there?
In polling there, it had shown in Wisconsin that people thought Biden was better fit to handle the COVID-19 pandemic. It has hit the state hard in September and October, and so it was at the forefront of many people's minds who were voting for former Vice President Biden. Now, I was in Wisconsin a lot towards the end of October. I went to 3 of the president's rallies there, and his supporters were not so concerned about the coronavirus compared to Biden's supporters. Of course, that was shown in the exit polls, that difference between the two. So, for people who were upset with the way the pandemic had been handled, this was certainly something that factored into their decision.
I'm just curious, at those Wisconsin rallies of the presidents that you attended, was there a lot of social distancing or masks, or was that largely absent?
It was, I would say, there were people wearing masks and, more people, though, not wearing them. And these were large rallies, thousands of people standing or seated very close to each other, just like we've seen in Pennsylvania or Florida or Michigan, North Carolina, Arizona, anywhere else the president had traveled recently.
Right. All right. So pulling back and looking at the bigger picture a little bit now, what does it say that Joe Biden was able to flip this state from President Trump, who won it in 2016? As you pointed out that, before 2016, it had a pretty solid Democratic history. So perhaps that isn't as surprising as flipping a traditionally red state. But still, it's got to mean something to his campaign.
It's something that Democrats really talked about. I mean, the 3 states that they were focused on most during the early days of the caucuses in Iowa, of course, Iowa in the Midwest, so, speaking to a similar set of voters. Now, the night did not go so well for Mr. Biden in Iowa, but still, they had focused on winning back these Midwestern areas, and that had kind of been the building blocks for them, and as they built out their campaign and looked at their paths to 270. Of course, 2 of those states are still in question, Michigan and Pennsylvania, as there are still many ballots left to be counted in both of those states.
Right. And of course, the Trump campaign has said that it will immediately request a recount in Wisconsin. What can we expect to come from this? Of course, as we've pointed out, we've projected that the state will go to Joe Biden. The final results are not in, so nothing, I guess, legally can happen until every vote is counted. But what would a legal challenge there in Wisconsin look like?
So this is a process. First, the counties will have to go through and canvass the results, basically go back and look at all the results, make sure that every vote was cast properly and tabulated properly. That process has to play out first. That'll take a couple of weeks. The deadline is November 17th for counties to complete that. After that process is finished is when a recount can be filed if the margin is still 1% or less between former Vice President Biden and President Trump. Now, as far the president's campaign said in a statement that there were irregularities at polling places. The Wisconsin Elections Commission Administrator Megan Wolf said today that these elections are administered in public. There is an open, bright light on them at every step, and that there is meticulous detail that goes into executing these elections and carrying them out. So we've seen recalls in Wisconsin before. The state is, or excuse me, recounts in Wisconsin before. We have seen recalls there too. But the process played out in 2016, and when Jill Stein filed the recount, cost her about $3.5 million. It netted the president about 130 votes from that process. Now, if it will play out the exact same way, we don't quite know yet, but there's going to be a little bit of a wait-and-see period before a next step is able to be taken.
Right. And I guess there's no official number, no sort of margin that would trigger it. In other words, if the winner ends up winning by, hundreds of thousands of votes, it's probably not worth triggering a recount. Is there a number that might be worth it? Of course, we saw in 2000 in Florida that recount was, triggered by just over 500 votes. That seems reasonable. But, is there a number in Wisconsin that might automatically trigger one?
There's not an automatic trigger, but the margin does have to be 1% or less between the candidates in order to file a recount challenge. And so you point out a great point about the margin, around 20,000 votes right now. Former Republican Governor Scott Walker of Wisconsin, tweeted today that is a big margin to overcome, and pointed out what the recount effort in 2016 did for the president, getting him just an extra, 130 some votes. And that wasn't filed by the president's campaign. He won. It was just when they went back and looked at all the ballots, he ended up with about 130 more votes than initially were allocated for him.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well,
Excuse me,
Adam
that was the
Brewster,
margin.
thank you so
His
much
margin,
for your
his winning
insight.
margin was about 130 more. Yes, thank you.
Got it. All right. Thank you so much, Adam.